to the Working Money Podcast, the show where we talk about the best ways for you to use your money. We have business owners and entrepreneurs as guests on our show. We ask them about the startups, their ups and downs of having a business, and the ultimate rewards. We also ask about their views, perspectives, advice for the new entrepreneur starting out. And now your host, Michelle Wong, and
co-host Willie Morales.
So Rajiv, I appreciate you being on the show. Tell us about yourself a little bit. How did you get into business? How did you become, the next Steve Jobs?
Yeah, I don't wear black, so yeah. I don't wear black turtlenecks. And I'm a nice person, so there you go.
Okay.
But yeah, so first of all, thank you to Michelle and Willie for having me on the show. Happy to be here. Happy to speak with you. Happy to share, any information that I know on any subject, especially if that can help anyone listening, either a business owner or somebody who's looking to get into business. So yeah, so just a quick introduction. So I started out in advertising pretty much from the get-go, straight out of college. Did a year of copywriting, followed by a year of public relations. And then after my MBA, I got into full-on account management, or client servicing as it's also known, in mainstream advertising. And then mainstream advertising then evolved into internet marketing and digital advertising. And then I've done several stints at large global agencies like Saatchi & Saatchi, Leo Burnett, and then Mindshare, on which I was the digital account director for Team Unilever. So I worked on the Unilever account for brands like Axe, Lipton, Pond's, Dove. I mean, you name it, I worked on it. Nor. So did some of that, and then also had a stint on the client side. I was the senior vice president at Citibank, taking care of acquisition for the credit card business. And after that, I don't know, I guess I was just inspired to set up my own shop, and that's what led to R Square Media.
Wow.
Sounds cool. Very impressive.
Thank you.
So, in regards to starting your business, was the transition easy, or was it hard for you from being someone that was working for someone else to being your own business owner?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It was, the transition, I think, was a little bit choppy initially, because it's kind of like, when you're, let's say, at Citibank or at Mindshare, like any corporate place like that, you kind of take a few things for granted. Things like, if you send somebody an email, you usually get a response in less than 5 minutes of sending the email. But when you're your own shop, or you're setting up your own shop, and you're reinventing yourself, so to speak, as a new entity that nobody knows about, and not too many people care about either. So it's like, then when you send an email and then you don't get any response, it's kind of like you get frustrated as to why that's happening, because you're using, experiences from an earlier stint and thinking as to why it's not working out here. When these two situations are so disparate, it's kind of like like the difference between the earth and the sky, So it's like you really have to it's a very humbling experience to realize that setting up shop, and it's like building from scratch, and it's like kind of like reimagining yourself, and also letting other people know, more importantly, like who you are now. Mm-hmm. So you're not, like the SVP at Citi, and you're, let's say, like a business owner of a small little unknown shop, in New York. So that it takes a little kind of like getting your brain around to begin with first. Once the shock wears off, and you then begin to embrace the reality of the fact that, okay, so this is where I am. This was not a mistake. Okay, now I got to do this, So once you start getting into the flow of things, then life becomes a lot easier, and then you actually learn a lot more skills, and I think the process makes you a lot more street smart in this. And this is something that is often, let's say, not taught in traditional, like education institutes, nor is it even taught or trained when you're, working like in a corporate environment, because that's in a very, let's say, controlled environment, and things that, small business people do is just not even in that realm. So it's kind of like you have to unlearn old ways of doing things and learn new ways of doing things relative to the new situation that you're in. And it's kind of like you got to like deal with that level of change as well and adapt yourself as well. So for example, one of the, like, let's say, early frustrations was, especially if I'm working with another business owner and I make an appointment, like, I guess, like, you obviously know this since you're a business yourself, that common sense tells you that, just before going for a meeting, especially when you're dealing with a small business, like 1 hour before you call ahead and said, hey, are we still good for a day? Now, me being like, the ex-corporate guy, I made an appointment 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, he made an appointment, he confirmed on email, so it's good. But no, it's not good, because when you're a small business and you're working with other small businesses that aren't quite, they don't quite have it together. So it's like one of the biggest, like, let's say, frustrations and challenges was learning that you can't exteriorize what you think the world is and how it operates and expect others just to kind of work in that. You got to just accept how the world is and kind of work through that. So one of the earlier, like, learning experiences was arriving at a meeting and the client was like, oh, I forgot. I didn't know we were meeting today. And I'm like, hello, I'm right here. I'm outside. Like, where are you? Oh, I'm in Florida. Something bizarre like that. So it's like, so funny things like that happen, and then you realize that, what, you got to like take off that, senior vice president hat. It's not doing you any good. It's not doing you any favors right now. Put on like the hat of, okay, you're the small business owner. You got to think like a small business owner, that small business owner that you were trying to engage with, and then approach it from that standpoint, as opposed to, somebody in the ivory tower who doesn't have a clue as to how the world runs. So it's
Yeah.
like those were like some of like the early challenges and frustrations. But of course, once you get into the flow of things, you kind of understand how the world really works, how people work, how their thinking works, and then you kind of just become better and better at it. And it's like every day is a learning experience, and you just adapt and you absorb and you learn, and then you keep pressing forward.
Did you have either encouragement or did people try to talk you out of going to business for yourself? Because if you had like like a steady paycheck and all of a sudden, you're relying on customers and yourself, did anybody try to, talk you out of it?
Yeah, so that's another really interesting question. So I had two entities that I've been working with. One supported me like 300% and said, go do it. And the other entity said, oh my God, are you crazy? Don't do it. My wife, she supported me like right from the get-go and said, you know what? I think you're not really cut out to, like work with somebody else. You should like do your own thing. It's scary, but in the long run, it's something that you're gonna know was the right decision. So she supported me before inception and right through the inception process as well. And my parents were the one that said, "Are you crazy? What do you think about it? What are you thinking about? Like, how are you gonna pay your bills and blah blah blah." So
Right.
like, I was kind of like really caught between those two very powerful forces, and I just kind of like had to listen to my heart and kind of take the plunge and say, you know what, you only live once, and you really got to, because the worst thing in life, what's worse than failure is regret. And the regret that you didn't try everything that could leverage your, like God-given ability.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of like, how it happened, and I did end up, following my heart and following my passion and actually go and taking the plunge and, doing the business full time, which means stepping away, like you said, from, like the paycheck, which was a nice paycheck, but, this really is the future. And what America teaches you is that if you work hard and you're good at what you do, you truly can, get to as high as you like.
You are the prime example of what the American dream is. You have the company just by yourself? Do you run it by yourself, or do you have partnerships with other people?
The company is a partnership, so I'm the co-founder. The other co-founder is my wife. Like I said, she was the one that instilled in me the confidence to truly, pursue my the dream, to really follow the dream and follow my heart, to have the courage to go ahead and take the plunge. And so she definitely is my counterpart as far as the business as well. So I take care of the sales strategy, the and oversee part of the implementation, and she takes care of the creative part, the design, the development, that part of it. So I'm the sales director and she's the creative director. So that's kind of like how we run the business as of now. And we are in the middle of growing a little bit. So we have taken on I want to say three more employees that we are working with. Two of them are in production and one is in sales. And so that's how we're growing. I guess we're growing sort of organically,
Mhm.
So it's kind of like the classic chicken and egg, because either you grow when you have like an explosion of sales, or you become the catalyst for the explosion and then grow as well. So like our growth is sort of somewhere in the middle of those two, where we're trying to become the catalyst for the growth, as well as uh, be big enough so as to accommodate that growth. Because the biggest challenge is either you're too small and then you can't take on big accounts, or you're not ready for that jump, so to speak. So it's like we're sort of in the middle between that, taking on bigger and bigger clients.
We do recommend when you're first starting out to partner with someone because it is difficult.
Right.
And if you partner with someone that you trust, you're kind of hitting it right on the nose on this one when it comes to working with your wife, and it works well for you.
It's not like every day is a walk in the park, or a basket of roses or anything like that. I mean, things do get pretty like heated and contentious, and things like that. I mean, as with like anyone, sure, when you are working with like a relative, spouse, something like that, then things do take like a different level, because that person outside of work and are so closely like intimately involved with that person. So because of that, that does add definitely several layers of complexity to speaking to them, because then whatever you say, as innocent as it might be, could very often be taken out of context, because rather than just looking at, okay, this is the feedback that somebody is giving, these people then just take it completely just solely emotionally. And
Right.
that takes like a long time just to kind of like get out of. So yeah, so I mean, you're right. What you said was absolutely right, because working with like family members, relatives, can be extremely touchy. It's like walking on eggshells, because number one, you're like so close to them, you sometimes can't be as direct and transparent as you would with any other person, because you don't
Mhm.
want to hurt their feelings. But then on the other hand, you got to be true to the business, because the business
Right.
is something that's without emotion and is objective, and you got and
Yeah.
objectives need to be met in a timely fashion. So it's kind of like working with relatives definitely is a challenge, and continues to be a challenge, but it also can be a good thing, especially in the sense that between working with them, you, at least in my case, in this case, working with Ruth, uh, I know that whatever input she's going to give me is the most honest input that I can get from someone. And I mean, so obviously I'm not looking for somebody that's always going to agree with everything I say, because that then defeats the purpose of having two minds,
Right.
because then you kind of like need that second point of view, just to sort of step back and look at the bigger picture and see, like, is there, like, what's missing? And if you have somebody that just simply agrees with you, and just says, yeah, 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 you're doing good, yeah, 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 you're the best thing since sliced bread, that doesn't like do you any favors, you know?
Yeah, and you can't grow as a business or as a partnership if like you said, Rajiv, if she's always, or if anybody's always saying, yeah, 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 sure, you got it, yeah, you got to have some disagreements, and that usually happens. Rajiv, when did you start your business? What year? I don't know
Oh,
if you mentioned that.
yeah, it was started in 2011.
2011. Okay. Wow.
Wow, so you have some experience under your belt.
Right, right, a few years.
Were there any ups and downs in the business? I mean, can you give us like what are the highlights of the business when you first started out?
I mean, that's a great question. And, as with any business, there are, like, let's say it's the constant, peaks and troughs. If you look at like a standard diagram or a flow chart or something like that, I mean, that's kind of like, how it goes. And of course, the idea is that every business wants that, upward trajectory. But I mean, sometimes it could be kind of like this, slowly going upwards or something like this. But I mean,
Right.
so any business, it'll be something between the two where it's not like flatlining and it's, it is showing, like some month on month growth.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, so as far as that goes, yeah, I mean, it's like a constant struggle. But to answer your question, as far as some highlights goes, so I think the biggest, let's say, learning is that when you're in business, I mean, it's you got to bring your A game. You can't take anyone on face value. You got to it's kind of like, I think I heard this somewhere. I think it was in a TV show. It's about I think it was a law TV show, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Boston Legal or something, or LA Law. I'm not sure, but it was something about trust and verify. So it's like you trust someone, great. They say they're going to do something great, but then also, of course, have it documented, but then check to see that they actually do what they're going to do. And that's something that I've found, is a good kind of gauge and measure to sort of work with, because this way, you're always kind of on top of things, as well as nobody can kind of pull a fast one on you or, like take advantage of you, especially, and I'm saying not so much from the perspective of like partners or collaborators, but more so from clients. Very often you'll meet with a high profile client who'll say that, hey, don't you know me? Like everybody knows me, and because of this, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like I would say those clients are the ones you got to watch out for, because
Right.
they're the ones that have the highest likelihood of pulling a fast one. And it actually happened to me. And it's like this really, really high profile client, extremely high profile organization, and this client just pretty much like defaulted on the payment or had to take him to court. And all of that was like a learning process as well. By the way, so that client was kind of terminated, and his replacement came, and I'm actually still working with that organization with his replacement. So it just goes to
Gotcha.
show that when you do a good job, people recognize it. They realize that integrity. They see the integrity, and then they kind of appreciate that and kind of want to gravitate towards it. So so that was kind of like a mix of like a high and low, I guess, at the same time. The high, of course, just overall, I think, was when we moved into our corporate headquarters, which is at RXR in Uniondale. This building is called the Twin Towers of Long Island. Not that it's a huge skyscraper or anything, but it's kind of like, I guess it's like a tongue-in-cheek, description of the building. I think it's about maybe 15, 16 floors high, so it's not truly a skyscraper. But
Right.
at least given the current landscape of Long Island, it's fairly tall. So so that was like a big deal when we moved into the office, and that was definitely one of the biggest highlights.
Wow. That's amazing. So you guys moved into a corporate headquarters in what, 2012, 2013? When was that?
No, that was actually last year.
Last year. Wow. And how was
Yeah.
that when you guys, how did you feel inside? Were you excited? You're like, oh my God, we've come a long way, but hey, now we have a headquarters, so to speak.
Right. I mean, it's like a mix of, like dual emotion, in the sense that yes, it's a sense of a little bit of accomplishment in the sense that yes, we've reached here, but there's a lot further way to go, as well as, oh my God, I'm here. Now,
Right.
it's like the classic fear, oh my God, the rent so much, how am I going to afford it? And like fears like that. So it's kind of like battling between that. And like somebody once told me, if your faith is bigger than your fear, you can pretty much accomplish anything that you want because you know that you're self-driven and you're just going to go and do it.
To the new people that are starting out, what advice would you give them?
First of all, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because if it's like I would say a passion check. Are you truly passionate about this? Is this something that you're willing to eat, sleep, dream, like 24/7, 7 days a week? If the answer is yes, yes, and yes, then okay, so this is something that you could explore. And secondly, I would say create a business plan. Just like any business, whether you're an inventor or a business owner, it amounts to the same thing. Have a very clear idea as to are you solving for a problem? Is there some niche that exists in the market that you're like performing better than others that exist in the space? Or do you have the ability to like provide a service at a great price, and there's something about you that differentiates you from everybody else, or at least people in your immediate let's say vicinity or neighborhood or something like that. And if the answer is yes, then okay, fine. So that's another check in the right side of the box, and you definitely should explore this. And thirdly is identify as to what kind of business are you going to go after. Project to see if that business is something that is it a seasonal kind of business, is it an ongoing business, is it a business that's growing, or is it a business that's declining. So that's again something that you have to be really honest about with yourself. And if the answer is that it's growing, then yeah, then you definitely should go forward, even if it's not growing or even declining slightly. If there is enough of an opportunity, to like make a good living out of it, I would say still go ahead and do it. But you gotta like think about all of these things holistically before just kind of diving in and saying, I just want to do it because I want to do it or I feel like doing it. So it shouldn't be done on a whim. It should be done. It should be a well thought out, rational decision. Backed by emotion, of course, but it should be a rational decision. And of course, once you take that decision, stick with it. It's because as I'm sure you know the statistic, like 98% of most businesses fail in the first like 1 year or 2 years. The ones that remain, even from that, like 90 or 85% of them fail in the third year. So the reason that businesses fail is because people either lose the drive, lose the passion, lose the interest. They feel like, it's like an unwinnable battle, and then they just drop out. And then they kind of go back to like a 9 to 5 or something like that. And I'm not knocking, having a 9 to 5. I mean, it's great if you can have a 9 to 5 to have that, that cash flow, the revenue flow that you can sort of count on to as capital for your business or your venture. So that's actually excellent if you can do that and kind of do the business as well. So that's like the best combo. But the idea is that you should stick with it. Because if you don't stick with it, then it's kind of like you've convinced yourself that it's not worth it anymore. And then, that's the difference between, like successful entrepreneurs and what Mark Cuban calls entrepreneurs. So
Right.
you
Yeah. I
gotta,
heard him say that. Yeah.
yeah, so you gotta like define who you are. Are you an entrepreneur or a entrepreneur? So depending on who you are psychologically, that's what's gonna like result in the output. And ultimately that's what kind of contributes to your success.
I heard one time on a different podcast, Rajiv, where this guy was for his real estate business. He was making phone calls. He didn't have much money in terms of direct mail. So, according to the interview, I think he made over 4,000 phone calls, and I think on the 4,001, if I remember correctly, he finally got a sale. He finally got a property. And imagine if you would have quit at 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, or at 4,000. And I think that's what it is too. Some people just don't keep going,
Right.
and then they quit, and you never know what could happen, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's actually a great analogy because it's kind of like, if you ever walk into any mall, you'll see these guys like these little mini kiosks, these whether it's the cell phone guy, the perfume guy, the mini hair salon woman,
Yeah.
you'll see these guys at every mall, no matter where you live, you walk into any mall, you'll see them, and you'll notice that, like, the moment you kind of walk anywhere in their vicinity, they'll be like, excuse me, sir, like, can I interest you in something, And very often you'll be like, no, not interested, whatever. But the point is that if you go there the next day and the next day and the next day, these guys are still there. So what does
Yeah.
that mean? It means that these guys get like 1,000 no's, but in spite of that, they're like still on it. And the reason for that is because they know that at the end of that 100 no's that they get in a single day or in an afternoon, there'll be one yes, and that yes will be a big yes.
Yeah.
Each yes is going to lead to another yes just by referral. So
Yeah.
it's like if you have that mentality and that orientation, that's like a great model to realize that persisting truly is the way forward.
I know that you've mentioned before that you like to read. What books would you recommend to the people that are listening or viewing this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've read some really interesting books. It kind of depends on whether you're reading a book to acquire more knowledge, to expand your mind, to expand your horizons, depending on that. But some of the books that I would definitely recommend people read are, number one would be The Alchemist. That's a great book. It's something that kind of, I mean, as a business owner, I mean, even before I was a business owner, I read that book and it kind of just made me think as to what do I really want and why do I really want it? And the fact that if you want something and you go for it, you can get it. So that's something that, like did help me. And it did kind of uh, help with that, later decision-making process. So I would definitely recommend The Alchemist. Another book that I would
That's a great
really,
book.
oh, you read it?
Yeah, I read it a couple of times.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great book. So that's definitely a great book to read. Another really good book to read is called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. It talks about, thinking and how thinking changes and what is that moment of change at the point when a suggestion becomes an action, you know. So that's another really interesting book to read just to figure out as to even from, anyone's perspective, how to influence, when does that change happen, how to anticipate that, and also how to orchestrate that. So that's, another really interesting book. And the third book that I would recommend would be Blue Ocean Strategy. That's a really, really, really interesting book. That and Freakonomics. Both those two books are super, super interesting, just from the standpoint of giving you a very interesting point of view, uh, just how to size opportunity, as well as the Blue Ocean Strategy is really good at figuring out an interesting, creative way to look at your situation and how to, come up with a truly disruptive solution to that thing. And there are many case studies given in that in that book. Like for example, one of them that I remember is Cirque du Soleil. The Cirque du Soleil is this really famous, almost Broadway-like 3D production. But the history is that they were initially a circus, and then they thought as to, like the cost of animal maintenance is becoming really high. It's really costly to have elephants and tigers and lions and things like that, because it costs a lot to keep an animal like that, just from like a maintenance standpoint, food and all of that. So they were like, how do I create a circus environment that does not have animals, does not have traditional circusy type things, but yet is interesting to the point that people might be willing to pay like a slightly more higher price for something like that. And then of course they innovated the whole concept of having like a Broadway production themed type act that became so three-dimensional that it became like a truly, like it was truly phenomenal, because when it came out there was nothing like it. and it was a paradigm shift. And then people saw it and loved it, and it's like now they've become, and they continue to innovate. So that's the thing. Constant innovation is what's required. Innovating only once is not enough.
All right,
Yep.
those are great books.
Okay, Rajiv, for the listeners that we have, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to reach me is on my email, which is rajiv@rsquaremedia.com. So that's RAJIV for victory at R square SQUARE media MEDIA.com. So that's my email. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and I check it every minute, on the minute, 19 hours a day. So they can also check out our website, which is rsquaremedia.com. They can also check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram as well, and LinkedIn. And that's where, if you type R Square Media or my name, Rajiv Jadhav, RAJIV JADHAV. If you type that out, it'll come right up.
Okay.
So that's the way to get a hold of me and the company. You can also call. We're on 646-249-3561. That's 646-249-3561.
There you have it. We have Rajiv. Thank you for being a guest on our show. It was very insightful. I can definitely see that William can relate in the knowledge that he received in regards to the books.
Great information on. We're going to get show notes. So in our website, we'll put the show notes, the books you recommend, obviously your website. Plus, when we get it edited, we're going to put it on YouTube and on iTunes. Here at Work Your Money, people like you, that's who we want to interview. You were so generous with your information, and we appreciate it. So you can find us at workyourmoney.net or facebook.com//workyourmoney. Anywhere else, Michelle, that they can find us?
They can go on to our Patreon page. We just started a Patreon page, and it's under Work Your Money Podcast.
And you can find us on iTunes. Just type in Work Your Money. Give us a good review because we need it. And Rajiv, I don't know what to say, but thank you. We definitely want to have you back on the show sooner than later.
Sure, anytime. You know how to reach me.
Yes, definitely. We got that now.
So until the next time, everyone, I bid a good evening, and that's it.